Hi, this is Amelia Vogler, grounding and energy medicine specialist, and your host in the Energy Magazine exclusive interview series. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Judith Orloff. She's a psychiatrist, an empath, and a New York Times bestselling author of a new book, The Genius of Empathy. This is a book filled with powerful skills to tap into empathy as a daily healing practice. In addition to her new book, she's also the author of the widely appreciated The Empath Survival Guide and Thriving as an Empath. Beyond her writing, she's a UCLA clinical faculty member and maintains a private practice where she specializes in working with highly sensitive people. Judith, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here with you.
Yeah. So I think that I'd love to start and meet empathy through your perspective. You know, we can talk about empathy from the energetic, from the interpersonal, from the psychological, from the somatic. So from your perspective, what are the differences between empathy, compassion, and being an empath?
So I wrote The Genius of Empathy to help empaths and everybody who wants to get more in touch with their empathy and wants to improve their relationships, so that you can have access to it in your daily life. And some of the terminology includes empathy, which is my ability to connect to you, let's say, and put myself in your shoes and whatever you're feeling. Compassion is not so much that as it is kicking into action and helping somebody, a compassionate act, being of service to somebody. If my neighbor doesn't have food, I'll go to the market and get my neighbor food so they could eat, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
An empath, which I'm a psychiatrist and an empath. An empath is somebody who's very, very empathic, highly empathic and open, but they don't have the same filters that other people have. So they often become emotional sponges so that we energetically absorb the emotions and just the general energy of the world into our own bodies. And so part of what I want to teach people in this book is how to be open and loving without absorbing the negative. But you could absorb as much positive and love and compassion and hope and fun. You could absorb all that, but you don't want to absorb depression or anxiety or anything that isn't yours, and it will bring your well-being down.
You know, Judith, I think you're speaking about something that's so beautifully nuanced in the energy medicine community, because so many of us take in, take on, and then have to do that filtering that you're referring to. So, yeah. What has it been like for you in your life to be an empath in clinical practice?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, at this point, because I have had a long journey with this, coming to terms with how helpful being an empath is for every aspect of our being, and how energy medicine is just essential for us to understand the energetics of how we relate to the world, and to develop boundaries and limits and practice self-care. And I'm a big believer in meditation. And one of the precepts of the book is observe, don't absorb, which means you observe something going on, but you're able to put up a shield, or you're able to take a few steps backward or breathe it out, so you don't take on other people's suffering, because there's just too much suffering around to do that. It's not practical. And we need to keep our stay in our own lane, and help when necessary. But these are, as you said, nuance. I like that word, the nuances of energy medicine and being an empath. But it means being aware of your body. And I walk you through this in the book, how to be aware of your body and know what you're picking up. You can read a room, intuitively read a room, so that you know when to take a few steps back or when not to ask somebody how they're doing. As empaths always do that. They always say, how are you doing? And it's an open-ended question, never ending, the life story that invites the life story. And unless you're ready to listen to a life story, I wouldn't say that necessarily with somebody who's going through a lot.
What would you say in that situation?
My heart is with you. I'll hold you in my heart.
Mm-hmm. And because we have so many practitioners and people in clinical practice,
Right.
To hold them in your heart is part of that, creating sacred space and holding that sacred container. So what do you suggest that we do in really allowing for that separation while also holding the container for, a therapeutic advancement or healing?
Yes, you're coming from a different place. When I work with patients, I'm not coming from my personal self. It's not like I'm sitting there listening to a friend going through something. It's not the same thing. I set aside all my problems and everything that's going on in life when I go in and see my patients. So I'm 100% there for them. And I focus 100%. So that's a little bit different than, how I would be outside of clinical practice. But I also am very clear that it's not my job to fix them. And it's not my job to take on the angst of the world. That's not what I'm meant to do. If I want to be a healer and help people throughout my lifetime, which is what I want, I have to learn, how to listen from a place of empathy and heart, but not observe, not absorb. And so it's really interesting. When I first, was going through medical school and I was working in the emergency room a lot at UCLA and USC, it was very interesting for me because I worked with car accidents, and heart attacks and really dramatic things happen to people. And I asked myself, why am I not getting so drained from this?
Mm-hmm.
And I came up with, I really believe this is true. When I'm involved with selfless service, I forget about everything else. I don't take on, I don't not take on, I just help. And
Yeah.
I learned that about myself, which was really interesting. As an empath, you'd think in those situations, I would absorb it all, but I wasn't. And so it's very different than me sitting with a friend where I'm more apt to absorb her issues than, working in an emergency room where I do what needs to be done. And sometimes as an empath, that's very important. You have empathy. I had empathy. I really did for everybody. But I was more into the compassion mode of do what needs to be done now because it's an emergency. And I need to be totally like an arrow, in myself. And that stopped me from absorbing a lot. I mean, not to say I didn't get tired, but I didn't have that hangover feeling that you get when you're an empath and you absorb other people's stuff.
Yeah, Judith, this is such a wonderful discussion for our communities specifically, because in modalities such as healing touch and other energy-based, kind of pure form energy-based modalities, we are invited as practitioners to really have dual boundaries with our client, which means we can be both the friend and the practitioner. And so hearing your perspective of really knowing which lane you are in that moment is such a critical teaching for our community, because I do think in an unpracticed clinical setting, when we're taught to maintain dual boundaries, they can get really messy. And so I'm listening to this conversation, thinking of many of my mentees who are in that place of sorting out how to negotiate those two lanes that we operate in. So you've gifted us with gold already. Thank you. I was also really interested because in the book you share 4 different types of empathy styles. And I was curious if you could share a little bit about that with our community?
Yes, there are four types of empathy, and just depends on what it's the default setting of people. They just go towards one type of empathy more than another. But there's cognitive empathy, there's emotional empathy, there's intuitive empathy, and spiritual empathy. Cognitive empathy is when you have the intellectual types who empathize a lot with their minds. They really wish you well, and they really want you to feel better, but they're not in their bodies or their hearts, which is fine with me. I mean, I don't think there's any reason to criticize cognitive empaths. You just have to know what you're dealing with. And the problem with cognitive empaths is that they often offer solutions too quickly, which is not what you do with somebody who's expressing their emotions to you. They don't want solutions right then. They want, I hear what you're saying. That's all they want, and not intervening. So there's cognitive empathy, emotional empathy, which is more of what I am, where, as an empath, my heart, my emotions reach out to you. I feel your emotions. I'm very attuned to various emotions, and I feel your emotions, but I don't absorb your emotions. All right, that's the practice in the book that I want people, energy practitioners, to look at and work with. Yes, it takes practice. I mean, I practice all the time. I have private practice patients. I give workshops, so I have had opportunity for tremendous practice in my life, and I still practice. I mean, it's not anything you ever master totally, because there's always something else. Like you're in a different state than you've ever been in front of a group. And so it's a new set of rules in terms of how can I take care of myself as an emotional empath and not take on, 100 people's various emotions. So there's that. And then there's intuitive empathy, where some people intuitively read others, where they get a sense of gut feeling, the energy going up or down, any flashes, knowings, body knowings, kinesthetic knowings are big. Just like, oh, you get this, or, oh, my heart's going out. But it's intuitive. And sometimes people could go on intuitive overload, where too much is coming in too fast. And that's why in the book, I talk about the importance of having the inner dialogue and saying, this is coming too fast for me. Can you please slow it down? I'm getting overwhelmed by all this information. And you have to learn how to have an inner dialogue with yourself as an energy practitioner. Really important, because you can tweak how the information comes in. If you're getting too much, you don't just have to be a victim of it. Oh my God, it's too much. And then the last type is the spiritual empathy, where there's some people who see the best in others all the time. They look at you or look at me, and they see all the good parts of us and all the beautiful parts of us, but they can't see the dark side or the shadow side. They don't see that because they're looking at the white light, which is above the crown, and they're focused more on the upper areas of the body and the chakras than on the lower. And so part of their work is to be able to see the whole person. So those are the different types of empathy.
Yeah. Brilliant. And I think any of us watching this later will be able to identify that we also probably hold all of those types within us.
It could be.
And, I know that I've seen different flavors of those empaths show up depending on who I was sitting with too, because we sort of adjust in the relational field.
Absolutely, you equilibrate with the person. So your energy is always aiming to harmonize, hopefully. That's the goal, is to harmonize but not take on. And I personally love to get into cognitive empathy. Sometimes it's easier for me. It's easier than the others. And so it's fine. You can use whatever you want, whenever you want it to use it. If you read this section, become familiar with the different types, the pros and cons, and work with it in your practice with patients, or in your life with friends. Just begin to become facile and flexible. in terms of what you can access.
What a great invitation, Judith. Thank you. So you're presenting right now to a group of people who are, really, I think, the poster children for your highly sensitive person or people. And
Yes.
so I'm curious about what being an empath or working through those your empathetic nature, how does that differ, or how do we work through our empathy gifts as a highly sensitive person? How's that different than other people?
Well, a highly sensitive person is somebody who's sensitive to noise, smells, sounds, light, texture, something scratchy, you can't stand it, if you have that sensibility. But being an empath is kind of one step higher on the continuum of empathy. And it's really being able to connect to somebody. And empaths can actually jump into your body and feel what you're feeling. It's a natural thing for us to do that. It sounds a little intense, but it's what we do. And we have to learn how not to do that, because it's just an instinct. It's like we're wired. It feels like it's a neurological wiring to me, that it's just something that's so instinctual. And children do it. They don't even never heard of an empath. And children, become enmeshed with other children, and then they get exhausted. So it's a skill that, all of us, as a community, I think we need to know that we have the support of each other. The empaths are my tribe, they're my people. And it's just a beautiful thing. And the empaths and everyone who's practicing energy medicine, needs to come together for support as a community as well. And, there will be bumps in the road, because you're always going to be living and growing and learning new things about yourself and having new experiences in life that impact how you view your patients. It's an ongoing process of change, which is what I love about it. And I wanted to, write the book, The Genius of Empathy, to give you a guide. And this is, I just turned to a page. You can offer support and guidance, but people are responsible for healing themselves, which I profoundly believe. I mean, if you get in there and somehow heal them, I don't know how you're going to do that. My experience is that it just comes back in a different form, because they didn't do the work.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. One of the tenets that we often hear in our field is all healing is self-healing. But, you're giving us permission to really hold a space that allows them to have their own story. That's what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. And I feel often like I jumpstart people's healing. That I could be very clear about. My energy and the questions I ask, or if we do energy work, and my energy can jumpstart people's healing, so they begin to get rolling where maybe they were stuck before. That's a great thing.
That's it's just awesome to hear. In some ways, both sides of your clinical practice, and I'm probably minimizing in that statement, but this idea of being able to use the superpowers of your empathy to shine your special flashlight in certain places and give them their story.
Absolutely. And a big theme of The Genius of Empathy is that empathy is a healing force, and that we need to open it up energetically, that it's part of energy medicine. And when you have empathy for somebody else, what that does is that opens the heart. See, that's the key to your heart, the empathy. And it opens your heart. And when your heart is open, the energy begins to flow out your chest and down your arms and out into the room and in to the other person, and it creates a loving environment for the healing to occur. And so just know that when your empathy is turned on, your heart energy is too. As opposed to cognitive empathy, it's a little less so. It's more in the mind, it's more mental. But what I'm talking about is igniting the heart. That is the source of empathy.
Now, we've been talking a little bit specifically about being in client practices, but all of us, anyone who's watching, has a community, a family, friends. And so I'm wondering, what's your perspective on empowering us around empathizing with people who are challenging, people we might not agree with, or people that we don't even like very much?
Oh, yeah. That's one of the chapters in the book is how to have empathy with people, even if you don't like them. Because I think liking someone is overrated. Liking someone is personal. You know, I might like someone, you might not like them. It's more personal. But because of what's going on in the world today, and we have, you know, it's so much about in our face. Do we want our planet to die, or do we want to begin to learn to get along with each other as human beings? And if you want to get along, empathy is the best hope we have of trying to get along with our human family. And so when you come upon someone you might not like, let's say you're a coworker, there's a chapter on how to deal with difficult coworkers. Let's say the coworker is a chronic talker, something like that. And they come in, or drama queen, and they come into work and you're ready to start, you got your momentum up, you don't want to be disturbed. And then here they come in with, oh my God, you know, I had to go to the emergency room because this car bumped me, and my mother doesn't understand me, and my children are, you know, not talking to me. And by the time they're finished, you feel like you've been in a washing machine going around and around and around, like, oh my God, you know. And so you have to learn to say, you know, I'm so sorry that that happened to you. Use your body language, use your body. That's a good communicator. Begin to shift, make the shift in the other direction. Look back at them and say, you know, I'm going to hold you in my heart. You know, as you go through your day, I've got to start my project now. But the way you do it, it's a setting boundaries is the key here. You do it with a neutral tone or a caring tone or matter-of-fact tone, which is really great. I love being matter-of-fact. You know, I'm sorry, I can't listen to you, but I'm going to hold you in my heart. And then they go away, you know, and they feel cared about, because it's not like you're saying, leave me alone, I just can't talk to you now. You know, but if you don't like them, they're irritating you, you'd rather not talk to them at all, but you have to get rid of them. You have to get rid of them so you could do your work. And you do it in an empathic way. So it's a very liberating experience when you learn how to do this with somebody you don't like, or somebody whose opinions on the world are even destructive. When you have empathy for someone, and this is a more sophisticated exercise, and you don't have to do it unless you want to. But when you have empathy for somebody, you don't have empathy for the violence that they caused, or the abuse, or anything like that. You don't have empathy for that, but you do have empathy for their crippled hearts, you know, and how wounded and sad it is that they have to operate the way that they do. And it's possible to have empathy for that without forsaking your values. And why you want to do that is because it frees you from being triggered by all these people. They're everywhere, you know, and you don't want to be triggered. You don't want to use your vital energy up. You want to know, I know how to handle this person. This is what I'm going to say. This is all I'm going to say. And it's perfectly all right. And it actually, sometimes magic can happen when you talk to somebody like that, because what you're doing is you're saying, I hear you, and I'm going to give it some thought. And that's what people want. Very basically, they want to be heard, they want to be seen, they want to be valued. So if ever you doubt, if the situation is so complex, you don't even know what to make of it, just remember the basic empathy truths: seen, heard, and valued. And by saying, I hear what you say, in the present tense, not I heard what you said. I hear what you say. And I'll give it some thought. Thank you. You're giving them a gift. You're changing a pattern of this. Mm-hmm. And the mind doesn't want to do it. That's in the book. You're going to learn the difference in the mind and the heart. The heart wants to do it. The heart wants to try anything to get along with people, because that's what the heart wants to do. The mind doesn't necessarily want that. It comes up for all kinds of excuses why not to have empathy.
Yeah. Well, and Judith, you gave us this sort of advanced situation when working with your empathy. But what about just a few maybe practical techniques before we close? Just some practical ways that we can start working with our empathetic nature and employ those into our lives.
Yes, just get familiar with, there's a chapter on empathic listening. Get familiar with setting a time limit. This is often hard for empaths, as they want to provide open-ended time. And it's not necessary. It's too much time, unless it's a good friend in a special situation that needs special listening. That sometimes happens. But in general, stick to 5 or 10 minutes. Just limit yourself, set the boundaries. I could listen for 5 or 10 minutes. Let's get together in this room. We could close the door, and I'm here for you for that amount of time. And let's stick to one subject. Because when people start opening up about everything in their life, it's not productive. You want to stick to one subject. When you're doing your healing work, let's say, just try and listen to the one perspective on the one topic, and then work with your hands. It's sometimes people don't even know what they need help with, but they give you, their idea of what they need, and keep it to one subject. Don't, have everything in the kitchen sink coming into this healing. It's really good to be specific.
Yeah. Dr. Orloff, thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything else that comes to mind? I know your book is going to be top of my reading list, and I can already think of quite a few of my clients to hand it to for their own awareness. But is there anything else in closing?
Yes, one thing we didn't discuss, but I would like people to go to this chapter if they, it's on self-empathy. Self-empathy is very important for you as a practitioner, as you're going to be working with all kinds of people. And sometimes some days are easier than others. Some people are easier than others. And you need to show yourself self-empathy and work on your emotional triggers, so that you're not triggered. When you're triggered, you lose energy. But when you're centered, it's beautiful. But you want to have self-empathy throughout everything, in every situation in your life you're ever going to have. You're going to need this. And you start with the self, and it's an energy. You want to activate self-empathy. It's an energy that comes from the heart. And then you want to apply it in every situation. I ask myself, how can I apply self-empathy here? How can I show myself, a little bit more empathy, today? And this is really nice, because the body hears what you're saying, and the body really likes this. So if you want your body to be happy, show yourself some self-empathy. And I want to say that, the genius of empathy, you go to my website, drjudithorloff.com, and you can get the book there, get it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, wherever you like. And I hope it helps you with your practice, and I hope it helps you with your own personal development, as healers and open-hearted people.
Thank you so much, Judith, for your time and for all of the time you spent creating this wonderful manuscript for us. We're so grateful to have you on today.
Thank you very much. It was a delight.